Oliver was shy and so reticent and so contained and so British. He once told me that the British were the result of too much proper breeding. The Tourette people, like me and like us, were so much the opposite of him. We are so extroverted, we can't stop at blurting out whatever it is that comes into our minds, and we have a total lack of inhibition, that it was almost like he was envious of it. Oliver wanted to write a book based on the travels with me, seen through the eyes of somebody with Tourette syndrome. This picture is Oliver with David Jansen of the Jansen family in Alberta, Canada. David Jansen was a member of the family of Mennonites, of over 100 people in this one family, where a huge percentage of them were affected by Tourette syndrome and different types of obsessive compulsive disorder. This Life magazine article that Oliver wrote was called The Divine Curse. Oliver wanted to call it Travels to Tourettesville, but the editor told him it was too long to fit on the page. Here's Oliver with Shane Fistel in Toronto. Shane is I guess what Oliver called a super Tourette, where he'll literally be all over the room in a matter of seconds, touching each corner or each wall or each table, and have to run back to the same spot and take up where he left off. Shane had a walk-on part in the beginning of the film Awakenings. Robin Williams played Oliver. The movie is based on Oliver's book, and I photographed a couple of the last living Awakenings patients with Oliver. He was one of the most curious people I ever met, curious about everything, about plants, about biology, about chemistry, about human nature. Everything that you would encounter as a person living on this earth, he was curious about. Oliver on the couch with Jonathan Miller at Jonathan's home in London. Jonathan Miller and Oliver Sacks grew up together and had known each other since they were 11 years old. And Jonathan went on to become a fabulous director of theater and opera. And now this is Oliver with his then 92-year-old father, who was still practicing medicine in London, in the house where Oliver grew up. Everywhere we went, no matter where we went, no matter what time of day or night it was, he would put down everything on the ground and start writing in his notebook, something that he didn't want to forget. This photograph shows Oliver on the train between Amsterdam and Rotterdam. As always, he had his notebook out and his pen at the ready. He wrote everywhere. He wrote everywhere. In California, when we were driving around outside of Los Angeles, he had to immediately pull the car over because he thought of something. He would also sometimes, when we pulled over, graze with the car door open on nasturtium and just eat it right out of the brush. He would literally graze on it like a cow. Oliver was a genius. But there were other things that were deficient in everyday sort of practical common sense things that he couldn't negotiate. Like one time we got in the car and it took him like 15 minutes to put the seatbelt on. And I remember him making fun of himself by saying, the most articulate man of his time, yet he can't put a seatbelt on. The whole photo shoot that I did with Oliver for this French magazine, they wanted me to do something with a hat because the man who mistook his wife for a hat had become so famous. So I had him kind of tossing a hat right in front of the camera. December 1987, and I will never ever forget this, Oliver and I spent an entire night in the red light district of Amsterdam. And we walked all over the place and we drank at bars. We smoked hash and we smoked pot, and we got incredibly wasted just all night long. Oliver was writing illegible things in his notebook, and I ended up photographing a couple of rolls of film with no film in the camera, I realized later. It was like 6 in the morning, the first crack of light in the sky. We went back to the hotel and we had 2 rooms right next to each other. I said, Oliver, don't come to my room before noon tomorrow. I remember I gave him the one last chunk of hash that we had left. And I said, here, you take this. I'm going to go to bed. So he said goodnight. at noon, exactly noon the next day, there was a knock at the door. And I knew, obviously, that it was Oliver. And I went to the door. I'll never forget how he looked. Oh, shit. His hair was completely like wiry and completely messed up, and his glasses were all crooked on his face, and his shirt was like out of his pants, and his belt was on crooked and everything. He said, Lowell, I fear I smoked the rest of the hash and wandered about the city all the rest of the morning. Oliver had a huge impact on the world and everybody who lived in this world. He was able to give us examples from his own life, using his own eccentricities, his own peculiarities. Oliver made people with all stripes of anything wrong with them not only be okay to have it, but to be celebrated, to be exceptional rather than somehow damaged or deficient. Oliver's legacy is showing us things about ourselves that we didn't know and that we can now not only accept but embrace.